NFL officiating ruins a tremendous game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Cleveland Browns. When is the NFL going to hold officials accountable? And what could the Colts have done to make the referees not matter at all? Believe me, we're going to talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined here, as always, by my fellow writer, analyst, and co-host of the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast, Drake Wally. Drake, I've been watching the NFL for a long time. I've seen a lot of bad penalties, and what I saw at Lucas Oil Stadium yesterday was some of the most egregious officiating that I have ever seen in my entire time covering football, in my entire time watching football. So instead of opening off this episode talking about a really exciting and fun game between the Colts and Browns, which we really didn't think was going to be too exciting, we're talking about officials, and that's simply just it shouldn't be how it is. So, how are you doing, buddy? How was your weekend? It's good to see you.
It was a really good weekend, nice relaxing weekend with Aubrey. And look, man, first off, like you said, what a hell of a game. I mean, it was awesome. It was an awesome game. But at the end of the day, yes, I think we'll get into it a little bit more. But just to make it very quick, yeah, I think it deserves to be talked about. I think it deserves to be looked into. I think it deserves to be asked why these guys aren't full time. And the implications that could come with not having full-time officials, which we'll also get into, which could affect the outcomes of games regardless of what people want to believe or not. It could happen, so we'll get into it. Very bad officiating in this game, one of the worst I've seen, and that's not just because we tend to be that we are Colts fans while we're also writers. It's because it's legitimately some of the worst officiating I have ever seen.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into that and everything that came from Colts Browns yesterday. Truett gets us off to a fire start tonight with a $5 super chat. Truett, thank you so much for all of your support, buddy. Truett says, "Don't be discouraged. When Shane was hired, they said it would be a process, and Minshew is no Anthony Richardson." Yeah, I think we're seeing
It's a good
that
point.
I mean those arguments that Minshew should be starting over Anthony Richardson, don't really hear those anymore. It's because Minshew has to start because of Anthony Richardson's injury. But Truett, thank you so much, buddy, for the super chat,
Thank you.
getting us off to a really hot start tonight. Brandon Moses in the chat talking about the Texas Rangers. Brandon, we don't care about the Rangers. We're talking about Colts football tonight. But hey, if the Rangers make it to the World Series tonight, good for you, buddy. My beautiful wife Danielle, with our nightly super sticker. We celebrated our anniversary yesterday.
Woo!
1 year down, forever to go. So thank you so much for the super sticker. Got to meet Stats Matt for the first time in person on Sunday as well. Hate to see that ending in person, and he also got to meet my wife and took my wife to the game. But it was great to see Stats Matt. Patrick, the CFO, is in the house. I hit a zebra with my car today because I had PSTD from yesterday, or PTSD from yesterday. So Patrick, you wouldn't blame you for that one. Marvin Fox says, "Don't think Andrew will be sending the refs any super stickers tonight." You think you're on track there, Marvin. Especially if you guys read my article on horseshoehuddle.com that came out this morning. I think you know exactly where I stand. And then shout out to Nathan Comanci as well. Says we have a top 10 linebacker. I think we got a couple linebackers that are up there as well. CMDSR from Virginia as well. Great to have everybody in. If you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our social medias, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on Twitter, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know whenever Drake and I are going live, whenever Shad goes live at the Saddle Up Show, so you never miss an episode. And if you can't catch us live, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star review on there. So Drake, we got to dive into it right away. We have a ton of stuff to talk about tonight. So the Indianapolis Colts lose to the Browns in controversial fashion. I think that's putting it nicely. 39-38 goes a lot farther than what our initial predictions were. You were a hell of a lot higher than I was on the predictions. I think I said 17-13. Did not think this game would be pushing 80 total points. So if you hammered that over, more power to you yesterday. But It was a high scoring matchup. I thought it was a great game personally. It was a very exciting game on both sides. There was plenty of plays being made by both units, whether it was a Colts offense, the Colts defense, Browns offense was making some plays. Certainly the Browns defense, the highly touted defense coming in. And it seems like nobody has really talked about that. I mean, we've heard some people here talk about it a little bit, but all the focus has been on the officiating, and rightfully so, because the officiating to end that game yesterday, whether it does not matter what side you are on, and if you are looking at it from an objective view, the officiating to end that game yesterday was an absolute sham. And it really destroyed what was fixing to be one of the best games of the year. Who would have thought it would be Colts Browns?
Yeah, and you'd never want to see something that's such an awesome back and forth contest like that come to a conclusion off of a bad officials or a bad call from an official. And we've seen games like that. I know that one, it's a long time ago, but I believe it was Packers and Seahawks when it was a Hail Mary pass and it was so clearly intercepted. But you had one guy say touchdown, the other guy goes like incomplete or like something like that. It's just such a high level of confusion at that time. But in this one, it wasn't really confusion. It was more just absolutely like calls where you're like, how can you possibly call that type of situation? And it was on a couple of different occasions. There were missed calls, there were bad calls that were made on pass interference. I know on Darrell Baker Jr. at the end of the game there that gave the Browns that goal line possession where they inevitably took the lead. But man, yeah, it's definitely for sure going back to what we were saying, one of the worst officiating jobs I've seen from start to finish in a game in recent memory. And you got to talk about it. You got to address it somehow. I'm not really sure how you would begin to address this, but there's a lot of different ways. But yeah, I think you're going to hear this game talked about for weeks to come. I think.
We have a celebrity in our presence, Drake, and it's the one, the only Tom Brady. Tom Brady showing his ugly face, coming in here with the $5 super chat. We appreciate the Tom Brady coming in and giving us $5 out of his millions of dollars. It's such a disappointing ending. Why can't the Browns win games fairly like I did? Touche, Tom Brady. Touche. That might go up in the Hall of Fame of comments on the Horseshoe Huddle podcast. But hey, Tom, thank you so much for your super chat and your support, buddy. Always brings a smile to our face when we see that ugly mug come across our face. Really appreciate it. But Drake, yeah, I mean, I kind of I touched on a lot of this in my article. So, and please, we don't have enough time tonight to explain and go into this as much as probably should. So be sure to go check out my piece on horseshoehuddle.com if you haven't done so already. But let's start talking about, I mean, there was many different penalties that we could have talked about, but let's talk about those two ones at the end of the game. The illegal contact on Darrell Baker Jr. I mean, you can say some people say that there is a claim to that it was illegal contact. He was more than 5 yards down the field. But when you look at the rule, and this is how I dove deep last night, went straight to the NFL rule book. The way illegal contact is identified is as if the contact is initiated by the defender. When you watch that replay multiple times, Amari Cooper is the one that initiates that contact. And really, it happens simultaneously with when EJ Speed is knocking the ball out of PJ Walker's hands. And that's why you saw Shane Steichen so upset over there on the sidelines when it happened, because that was the game sealing play. And again, instead of talking about an incredible play made by EJ Speed and then DeForest Buckner to cover it up, we're talking about a play that was happening 15 yards down the field that wouldn't have mattered anyway. It's not like that the illegal contact was like hurt the pass. And honestly, the illegal contact, I don't even know if it's really there, because in the rules, it clearly states that if an offensive player is the one that initiates the contact, the defensive player can use his hands to defend against that contact. And that is basically what Darrell Baker Jr. did in that situation.
Yeah, and when you look at the play, it almost looks like when the contact happens between the two, Cooper almost, when he almost pushes off with a full, his arm breaks the 90-degree plane, and he actually almost like shoves Baker to the ground. I think Baker went down to a knee and hopped back up. And I think that we talked about before the show, that seals the game. I mean, Buckner falls on that football. So it's really just a kick. It's a real kick in the gut if you're the Colts. And then after that, you have, I know that you'll go into it a little bit more since you wrote a piece on it, but after that, you have following a potentially an even worse call on the same exact defender. It's just like, what exactly was going through. I do wish I could just have been a fly on the wall inside the mind of that official and just like, what would prompt you to make such a ridiculous call? Any NFL official you would think is a fan, at least, or a person who analyzes the game like we do, you look at that and you're like, how can you possibly make that call? So I just think there were some really egregious calls that you could put probably in some of the worst we've seen. And it really ultimately, in my opinion and yours, it decided the game for the Browns.
And you said it was potentially worse than that illegal contact penalty. Oh, it was 100% worse than the illegal contact. PJ Walker throws that ball 8-9 feet out of bounds. It bounces into the stands at Lucas Oil Stadium, and it's called pass interference, where Donovan Peoples-Jones, unless he has a 60-inch vertical, he isn't getting up to catch that football. That football is way out of bounds. There is no chance in hell, even if Darrell Baker Jr. isn't on the field, say it's just PJ Walker and Donovan Peoples-Jones, there is no chance in hell that number 11 is going up and catching that football. That was one of the poorest excuses of a penalty that I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot of bad penalties. And here's where it's just so, this is getting very frustrating. Especially, we're in the year 2023. And you think of all the technology that goes into the game. You think of all the money that goes into the NFL and football. Number one, to not have full-time officials is unacceptable. I mean, to have these people only work a certain amount of the year and then to have them go out there and expect them to be at their best, that is, number one, it's kidding yourself, and it's foolish to think that's a recipe for success. Number two, the NFL, at some point, this is really going to bite the NFL right in the butt. And it's because it's only a matter of time. And it almost happened last year. If you remember the Eagles Chiefs in the Super Bowl, it almost happened. It almost helped determine the ending of the Super Bowl. If one of these times a really, really bad call is going to determine the outcome of the biggest game of the year, when you have hundreds of millions of people watching on TV. And that's not only going to cause bad publicity, it's going to launch investigations, because the millions and millions and millions of dollars that are bet on these games, because sports gambling is continuing to rise. The more that this happens, the more people have a stake into it, the more these outcomes of the game are going to be questioned. And you said, I don't know what could go into this official's mind, that why he would think to throw that. I mean, I wouldn't put it past to check his phone. Does he have a FanDuel, or does he have a DraftKings account? Investigations. Pat McAfee called for an investigation, and I don't think he was joking. When it gets to this level of incompetency at the highest level of football, we're not talking about a high school game. We're not talking about Joe Schmo, who's a PE teacher during the week and he referees high school football games on the weekend. We're talking about NFL officials. And especially in 2023, when you have the manpower, you have the technology to look at a replay and say, you know what, that's not right. That's not the right call, to quickly buzz down to the official and overrule it and say, hey, this isn't right. That's not the right call. And to just blatantly disregard that, it's a sham, it's a travesty, and it's a big black eye on the game of football. And as I said in my article, this is not coming from a fan perspective. I have zero pull in who won that game yesterday. But what I saw, and to make a great game, we're 15 minutes in this episode, we should be talking about what the Colts did on offense. And we haven't even touched that yet, because instead of talking about a great football game, we're talking about how officials completely changed the outcome of a game. And for all the people that spent really good money to go to Lucas Oil Stadium and watch that in person, got completely robbed. And it's not on the Colts. It's not on the Browns. It is on the NFL. It's on NFL officiating, and it's downright wrong. And it fires me up to really see this. And I'm not just talking about the Colts either. Pittsburgh Steelers and Los Angeles Rams. That game was decided by bad officiating. There was bad officiating last night when the Dolphins took on the Eagles. It's all around the NFL. And it can't continue. It really can't, because eventually there's going to be investigations launched, and the integrity of the game is being challenged at an all-time high. And quite frankly, it probably should be.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say I was gonna ask this. So, with a part-time official, do the rules apply for gambling to them since they're part-time and not full-time?
Yeah, that's the thing. So, yeah. Oh, Drake, you're getting me fired up, brother. But
that's okay.
You're talking about. Here's the thing: we have the NFL cracking down, suspending Isaiah Rodgers Sr. for a year for gambling, suspending Calvin Ridley for a year for gambling. But what about these officials? What are the rules on them gambling? And then you have a bad pass interference call. You go away to commercial. Oh, this game is brought to you by DraftKings. It's ridiculous. And I don't know if Brandon has ever seen me this fired up, even when we did a Colts podcast together. Brandon says, Andrew, taking my points we've made in the past, NFL is at risk of lawsuits when questionable stuff like this happens, especially if foul play is actually discovered. Very great point. Want to give a shout out to Jake. Completely missed your super chat because I'm just going on a tangent here. Jake Walton, thank you for the super chat, buddy. He says, you guys rock. Yeah, that officiating is horrible. Well, Jake, we're glad you're enjoying the show. Glad you're here supporting the program. And hopefully, if you haven't been a long time listener, we hope you do so. So really appreciate it, Jake. But Drake, just to kind of, I don't want to, I know I said I don't want to harp on this too long. It's already been 16 minutes, but there's just got to be changes made, because in the grand scheme of things, yes, it's the Indianapolis Colts versus the Cleveland Browns. Game doesn't really mean too much probably in the grand scheme when you're talking about the end of the season.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point is, if this continues, it's going to really hurt the integrity of the game. And if it does continue and nothing is done to stop it, or these officials aren't held accountable, it is going to happen in the biggest game of the year. And it's going to have major consequences for the NFL and really put the game of football at risk. And, with how officiating has been all season, not just in the games that we've watched with the Indianapolis Colts, it may be this year's Super Bowl where something completely terrible happens and the NFL is going to pay the price.
Yeah, and real quick, just to kind of put a bow on this. First off, hire full-time officials, okay? Second off, I want to ask you this because I feel like you would be the perfect person, especially since you just wrote something on it. Why do you think the NFL hasn't pulled the trigger on full-time officials?
I think it's partially money. I don't think they want to invest that in the officials because it hasn't really come back to bite them yet. I think they think it's perfectly fine with how it is, because it's not just the official salary. You got to pay for health care and all this. I definitely think the officials union or referee union, I'm not sure the exact term. I know they get in the way on specific things. I also know that the NFL also probably doesn't feel like they are at risk because everything with the officials is always kept behind closed doors. I mean, you never hear about officials being fined or anything. You say the NFL says, "Oh, we take care of these matters privately," and every official is graded. They could lose out on potential postseason opportunities. So what? NFL players. Michael Pittman is probably going to get fined for throwing up a peace sign on a 75-yard touchdown that happened yesterday. He'll probably get fined for that. But the official that threw that egregious pass interference call probably gets a slap on the wrist and just gets 3 words, do better next time. How is that right? That is it just makes me sick to my stomach when you think of something like that. And the NFL, when will accountability happen? Accountability needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. Officials should be fined when these things happen. The punishments do need to be public. There needs to be transparency on both sides. It's at the risk of sounding like Mike Florio, always coming after the shield. It just seems like when it comes to officials and the NFL, transparency is only needed when it benefits the shield, and that's not right for fans. That's not right for the integrity of the game. And as fans of teams and as fans of just football in general, we need to be asking these questions. And I'll be honest, I have been a little bit disappointed in the media coverage of this, especially with the local beat in Indy, not really diving too deeply into this when I think it is a matter that should be, not because you want this Indy team to win, not because you're being a homer, but because of the integrity of the game. And that's what we need to be worried about, because if we do have these things keep going on, what's the point? If it's not going to be decided fairly, then why are we even doing this in the first place? So come Patrick Rye with his super chat for the evening, coming in with some comedic relief. Patrick says Ed Hockley's biceps never would have stood for this. And
goat.
You're damn right, Patrick. You're damn right. Thank you for bringing the comedy on this one, buddy. Really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate all your support as always. But Drake, yeah, I mean, great game, and we're going to talk about the great game right now, but it does not excuse what happened with that officiating crew yesterday, and I am pleading to the NFL to make this right going forward. But let's talk about the game itself, and let's talk about a guy who tried to do his best Anthony Richardson impression yesterday on the ground. But boy, the turnovers, absolutely killer. Gardner Minshew, what a roller coaster of a day for number 10. Drake, talk to me about his performance, kind of what you saw from Minshew yesterday, and just what are your thoughts on how he performed against the Browns?
Well, actually, when you remove the turnovers, I mean, the guy has 4 total touchdowns. He has 2 on the ground, 2 through the air. I thought that he actually did a really good job of opening up big plays. A lot of big plays happened with guys like Pittman and guys like Downs. But at the end of the day, it's very weird because last week against the Jaguars, he has 3 interceptions and a fumble lost. And in this game, he has 3 fumbles lost and an interception. So he's got currently over the last 2 contests starting full time. Gardner Minshew has 4 fumbles lost, 4 interceptions thrown. And I know the Jacksonville game was a little bit more of a runaway, but if you look at where he turned the ball over, like we discussed last week, it gave them easy shots to score. So this was different. But his turnovers really came from fumbles. That was those were the killer, because Denzel Ward just ran the route for the receiver on his interception. So I think Minshew, man, he's showing a very rare proneness to turnovers that we haven't seen in his entire career. And so really you got to ask what caused it this time. Maybe it was Myles Garrett. Maybe it was just, a really good Browns defense. But overall, for fantasy purposes, he did pretty good. But as far as, to win the game, regardless of calls, you can't have 4 turnovers in the NFL.
Right. So when we're looking at his raw stats here, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, the 1 interception, a quarterback rating of 119.4, which is really good.
It is.
But it was the fumbles. The fumbles killed Gardner Minshew yesterday. And Patrick has a great stat here. Minshew has 27 fumbles and 27 starts. This is going to continue to be an issue. And unfortunately, Patrick, I think you're right. I mean, we talked about Gardner Minshew taking care of the football, and that's what he needs to do. That's the biggest asset for him, for the Colts to be successful. And he was dealing yesterday. I mean, he had the 2 touchdowns for the year. I didn't even mention the 2 touchdowns on the ground. Minshew added 29 rushing yards for that. But when you have 3 fumbles and you have the interception, the 4 turnovers on the day, it's really hard to beat any team when you turn the ball over that much. And one of those turnovers, one of those fumbles was in the end zone that ended up being an immediate 7 points for the Cleveland Browns to close out the first half. That makes 8 turnovers in the past 2 games, and it's really going to be tough for the Colts to win any games, even if the rest of the team is playing really good football, which honestly, if you talk about the team as a whole, I thought they played a pretty good game yesterday. But turning the ball over 4 times, it's just really, really tough to come back from this, especially when you don't have the firepower at quarterback like an Anthony Richardson that can will you back into a game and single-handedly win you that game. Honestly, even it's hard for guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow to win when you turn the ball over 4 times. And so what we had praised Gardner Minshew about so early in the season, protecting the football, just keeping the offense going, that's not really what he's been able to do consistently over these past 2 weeks. 8 turnovers is really just unacceptable.
Yeah, and if you think about the way that they happened and the reasons they were so bad, obviously the quantity is a big concern. But in the Jacksonville game, they had momentum catching up, and then here's a turnover. So then that comeback attempt, it's completely halted. Well, in this case, this was a back and forth affair where the momentum continuously was swinging. So when you are in just an absolute fist fight with another team and you're just matching each other's scores, you can't really afford to throw an interception or turn the ball over, let alone 4 times. And as we'll get to, the gentleman, as I'll call him, who decided to destroy the entire Colts offense on Sunday was a big part to play. But look, man, the entire Browns defense, they all caused issues for Gardner Minshew in this one.
Right. And outside of Gardner Minshew, like I was kind of alluding to, the rest of the team played pretty well. Let's kind of move to those positional players. Let's start with Jonathan Taylor. I think we can assume Jonathan Taylor is now back for the Indianapolis Colts. He had 18 carries, 75 yards, and a touchdown. Also added 3 catches for 45 yards yesterday. So overall, what does that make that? 110 yards total with a touchdown. So I mean, Jonathan Taylor looks like he's got his legs underneath him. And there was a drive when you're talking about the Colts trying to get back into the game. It was pretty much Jonathan Taylor the whole way. They kind of started building that momentum back up for the Indianapolis Colts. And as Stats Matt says, he also got a drug test today after his performance, which, again, the NFL doing what the NFL does.
That's how you know you did good.
So much for a random drug test. How about we randomly drug test those officials yesterday to see if they were on anything? But I digress. So, but Drake, you got to love what you're seeing out of number 28, and the more we saw, Jonathan Taylor outsnapped Zach Moss yesterday as well. So 28's on his way back, and he's looking fresh, he's looking good, and that's music to Shane Steichen's ears.
Yeah, and the Colts put an incredibly heavy emphasis on the ground game because Zach Moss matched. We didn't match the snap count, but he matched the carries. They each had 18 on the day, and together I think they had 132 yards between the two. So I mean, the fact that Steichen was like, "Look, we're going to give them each the exact same amount of a workload." That's pretty awesome. But the fact that Jonathan Taylor went from getting such a minimal amount in these first 2 games he was back to really ramping up that volume, that makes you very confident as a Colts fan. It should make you feel really good. And I've been seeing this all over X, is that you should turn the offense over to Jonathan Taylor again. This should be his offense, at least until Richardson gets back. Minshew needs that absolute blunt force kind of ground game that Carson Wentz had in 2021.
I'm very excited to see as Jonathan Taylor continues to ramp up and get more time in this offense, what things Shane Steichen schemes up for him. Because when you look at the running game, and I don't know if it is dropped on horseshoehuddle.com yet, but our colleague Zach Hicks is doing a film room on just all the various things that Shane Steichen is doing with this running game of the Colts offense. It's very unique, and it's really it's super cool to see. So when you're talking about a fully healthy Jonathan Taylor in this offense and what Shane Steichen is going to be able to do, it's just going to open up so many more things for this offense, take some of the pressure off of Gardner Minshew, so he doesn't feel like he has to do anything or do everything out there, excuse me. And then maybe you see the ball come out of his hands quicker. You see maybe him start to sense pressure, you hope anyway. So that way you eliminate the risk for those fumbles. But certainly having Jonathan Taylor back and ready to go full blown in this offense, something that not only will help the Colts down the road, but will continue to keep this offense at honestly a pretty good pace, Drake, because I think they're like sixth in scoring, eighth in total yards, even without their starting quarterback in Anthony Richardson. So credit to Shane Steichen, what he has done with this offense without his starting quarterback. It's been pretty remarkable to see. And we haven't even gotten to the wide receivers yet either. Let's talk about that. Josh Downs, rookie wide receiver. I think we can remove rookie from his title and just talk about future star wide receiver in Josh Downs. 5 catches, 125 yards, and that touchdown. Was the leading receiver for the Colts on the day. Boy, Drake, let's talk about Josh Downs and how impressive this kid has looked already in this young season.
Yeah, look, man, Josh Downs had, I mean, he didn't have a career high in catches in this game. I think he had 8 against the Ravens, but this guy showed he's got big playability. He's got ability to just get wide the hell open. I mean, when he caught that pass, it was a miscommunication on the defense, but he knew exactly what to do as soon as that happened. And I even posted this out on X. I said, Josh Downs looks smooth as hell. I'm like, this guy looks like he is legitimately a threat and will be a threat. And Reggie Wayne is a freaking wide receiver genius. This guy pounded the damn table for Josh Downs. No one thought they'd pick him up. In fact, you guys wrote the Indy draft guide, and even you guys didn't think that. No one thought that this was going to be a situation where they'd pick Josh Downs. And look at the payoff so far. This guy is just continuing game after game to get better and better and better. Man, he's looking every bit like what they wanted him to look like, and he's looking like a steal as a third-round pick.
He really is. And I mean, he's on pace to get, I think, 970 some yards this season, almost 1,000 yards in his rookie campaign. And then you pair that with what Michael Pittman Jr. is doing on that long touchdown run. Michael Pittman basically threw this kid off of him as he ran 75 yards, threw up the peace sign for the touchdown. Alec Pierce had a couple of really nice plays. He only had 3 catches, but every time he was throwing the ball, he made the most of it. That's all you can ask for out of Alec Pierce. So I thought it was a great game by the wide receivers. You know, they made plays when their name was called upon. When Minshew got them the ball, they were able to get open. And you guys got to remember this too. Yeah, we're so caught up with the officials and everything that the Indianapolis Colts were going up against a historic defense in the Cleveland Browns before the Colts went and showed up and beat the brakes in on them. You know, I think the Cleveland Browns before this weekend had only given up about close to 1,000 yards. The Colts had almost 500 yards of total offense on Sunday against the team that had only given up about 1,000 yards all season. Credit to Josh Downs, Michael Pittman Jr., and Alec Pierce really showed out against the tough secondary of the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and the next closest amount of points that the Browns let up was against the Ravens with 28. So I mean, the Colts. Look, man, I'll end this little subject with this. Shane Steichen understands offensive football. That's what Colts fans need to know. This guy spread that defense open. He got his receivers open. He was able to make Minshew look great. Minshew in just 23 pass attempts was still turned it over 4 times. Okay. They ran the ball so heavily and he still turned it over 4 times. So I think that the takeaways here are Josh Downs could become a legitimate threat as a receiver. Shane Steichen has got this offense exactly where it needs to be in the situation without Richardson. And I do believe that long-term, once Richardson returns after he's kind of digested all this, man, it could be a really nice bounce back here for him in 2024.
I agree. Patrick with another super chat on the evening. Really appreciate the super chat, buddy. Patrick says sample size, small sample size, but JT's hands are getting better, and when Steichen gets him fully into the pass offense, it's going to be like Austin Eckler times two. That's pretty damn scary for opposing defenses. One of the biggest knocks on Jonathan Taylor about him not being as well rounded of a running back was just his lack of production in the passing game, and if this becomes a routine part of his game where he's consistently catching 3 to 4 balls out of the backfield every single game, that just adds a completely different element to this offense that defenses have to be aware of, on top of the running ability that Anthony Richardson brings, on top of the quick winning ability of Josh Downs, the deep threat of Alec Pierce, the consistent threat of Michael Pittman Jr. really anywhere on the field. So just adds another element. But Patrick, thank you so much, buddy, for the super chat. We appreciate it as always. But Drake, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about a certain player on the Cleveland Browns that absolutely wrecked the game and basically was the reason they won the football game yesterday in Myles Garrett. But my God, what an absolute monster he is. Just unbelievable. Before I get to stats, Matt's super chat here, just want to read off Myles Garrett's stats from yesterday. So he had 9 tackles, 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, a pass deflection, 2 quarterback hits, and then I think he also forced 2 fumbles.
He had a blocked kick too,
and had a block kick. So it's just absurd, just an absurd showing out of Myles Garrett, and really shows what the type of impact that he has for this Cleveland Browns defense.
Yeah, and the fact that we just preached that's the one guy you cannot let dictate the pace of the Cleveland Browns defense. Mm-hmm. And then he goes out there and doesn't just dictate the pace, but he overturned the game, I think, for that defense. And regardless of how anyone feels about, the blocked kick and what may have given Myles Garrett that gap, he still got through. He still made an impact. He was all over the field. He was all over Minshew. We kind of figured if he was going to have a good game, that it could just completely break the Colts offense. And I think at times Minshew became a little gun shy because, Garrett was back there actually putting constant pressure on him. So I also think that Blake Freeland is showing that it's unfortunate for him. I do got to say this real quick because I saw in the chat, I get that Blake Freeland has struggled. Up to this point, but he also has had to start his career against Aaron Donald. He's had to start his career against Josh Allen, Harold Landry, and now arguably the best pass rusher in the freaking league, maybe even not even close, Myles Garrett. This guy's getting thrown right into it. So I think that his development is going to be, it's either going to break him or it's going to make him one hell of a player down the road. But at the end of the day, you got to contain Myles Garrett, and the Colts just didn't do it.
Easily the most talented defender that the Colts have faced this year.
Yep.
And in my opinion, should be runaway for defensive player of the year. There is nobody on the planet doing what Myles Garrett is doing on the defensive side of the ball. And credit to the offensive line for trying to slow him down, but really it's more of just not allowing him to take over the game rather than because he's going to get his. He certainly he made Bernard Ryman struggle at times. Blake Freeland didn't do great, but when you're going up against that level of talent, you're gonna get beat sometimes. It's just how do you persevere, and how do you try to scheme to help that out. But I want to move to the Colts defensive side of the ball, and this is kind of what Stats Matt says. He wants me to use his stats from X today to kind of talk about the defense. So before we get into specific players, Drake, I want to give you these stats courtesy of Stats Matt. So here are the scoring drives that Cleveland had on Sunday. So a 69-yard run for a touchdown that had a bad pursuit angle, a 36-yard touchdown drive, 0-yard field goal drive, sack fumble in the end zone, 36-yard field goal drive, 6-yard field goal drive, 17-yard field goal drive, and then the final Browns drive was aided by the 2 terrible calls. Stats Matt also says the Browns were 4 of 16 on third down. Only one running back was over 35 yards, and he had 74 with a 69-yard run. 0 receivers were over 60 yards. 2 turnovers forced, 6 3-and-outs with 2 being in field goal range. So I know 38 points. When you look at the scoreboard, not a lot. And thank you so much, Stats Matt, for providing all of those stats. And thank you for your super chat, buddy. Really, really appreciate it. Adding some, giving us all knowledge and adding to this show. But yeah, Drake, you see 38 points. You think, man, bad showing by the defense. That wasn't my takeaway. When you turn on the film, if you watch it again, if you were there in person, the defense did their part. You know, a lot of it was short fields. From the turnovers from Gardner Minshew, 7 of those points came on a fumble in the end zone that they got. So that automatically takes it down to 32. You're talking about the touchdown at the end that was gifted to the Browns off from the officials. Take another 6 points away from that. This defense, it made me feel so bad because there were so many guys on the defensive side of the ball that were just playing out of their minds yesterday. And again, it all goes for naught because of the terrible officiating. But the 38 points is not indicative about how well this defense played yesterday for the Colts, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't mean to briefly go back to it, but the Jaguars game, same exact scenario. 37 points let up, 17 points off of turnovers. The Jaguars won by 17 points. Okay, Same thing here, just not the same position on the field where they happened, but the quantity caught up with the Colts. You turn the ball over 4 times against even the New England Patriots or even one of these bottom tier teams, they're probably going to make you pay. If you turn it over 4 times, they're at least going to score probably twice somehow. So you get a team that actually can play that well defensively consistently, and you keep turning it over, you're not giving your team much of a chance. And like Stats Matt put out there, and like you read, I mean, this defense, I think you said this last week too, they actually played pretty well. And when you look at guys like Zaire Franklin and other 11 tackles, Kenny Moore, I think, literally turned into a Super Saiyan in the middle of the game and just decided to get every stat
Kenny
possible.
Moore the second, man, unbelievable.
He is playing like a Pro Bowler again. Look, at the end of the day, a lot of great things you saw on the defense, and even Shaq Leonard has another 7 tackles. You just can't really talk about it because 1, they lost, 2, terrible officiating, and 3, the amount of points that they let up.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I mean, the Colts had 2 interceptions, could have been 4. You know, Julian Blackman and Rodney Thomas had the interceptions, but one was almost an interception by Kenny Moore, and another was almost an interception by DeForest Buckner, of all people. So when you add all of that into it, I mean, the Colts defense was just everywhere. I want to give a shout out to Kwity Paye. It seemed like Kwity Paye didn't have a sack yesterday, but Kwity Paye, it seemed almost every time the Browns handed the football off, Kwity Paye was there to make a tackle right at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. You nailed it right on the head. Kenny Moore is back to playing at a Pro Bowl level. I mean, 10 tackles, 1.5 sacks, multiple tackles for loss, multiple quarterback hits, almost came away with that interception. That confidence in Kenny Moore is back, playing at a great, very high level. EJ Speed, really good performance. DeForest Buckner was back there. You mentioned Franklin and Leonard. Juju Brents, I thought, was having a really good game until he went out with his quad injury. So many good storylines and so many players on this defense playing really well. They're not the ones that are turning the ball over. They're not the ones that are giving up short fields. That's on Gardner Minshew. And that's what is really to blame for the Colts being in this position, not the defense.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you just cannot put your defense in such precarious situations, turn the ball over constantly. Doesn't matter if you're going against the league's worst defense or the league's best pass rusher like Myles Garrett along with the league's best defense. You just cannot gift the ball that often, even to a guy like PJ Walker. This is professional football. They're still going to find ways to score.
Stats Matt coming in with the heater. 23 points came from 59 yards of offense by the Browns. That is just
is a heater.
That's an incredible stat, friend. Just incredible. And so when you want to put 23 points on the Colts defense, I mean, in 59 yards, That's not on the defense.
That's
That's
an
not there.
offensive problem.
That's an offense. That's an offensive problem. That's a Gardner Minshew problem for not taking care of the football. So after all this, and talking about this Colts team, the Colts are now 3-4. They've really faced a lot of their toughest opponents. Yes, they still have a game coming up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They still do have to face off against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the teams remaining on the Colts schedule, very winnable games for this team. So Drake, as we sit here after Week 7, how confident are you in this Colts team with Gardner Minshew leading, with how this offense, the skill positions are coming about, with how this defense is playing? How confident are you in this team moving forward?
Well, just to get it out of the way, I think Minshew has a case of he's just had a real bad streak. I mean, hell, I remember Peyton Manning's last season actually playing for the Colts. He had a 3-game stretch of 11 interceptions. I mean, sometimes it happens. You just have the yips for a couple games. I think if Minshew can get over this turnover bug, I'm feeling pretty confident. I mean, Josh Downs, he's starting to break out. He's looking about as legitimate as you can as a rookie wide receiver. Pittman looks as good as he usually does. Alec Pierce finally had a 30-plus yard completion thrown to him last week, or in this game on Sunday. So you got to feel confident in these receivers. I think the tight ends could do a little more. I do think the offensive line looks pretty decent. Defense is playing really well. The points don't really indicate it, like we talked about. You look at the numbers like Stats Matt actually pointed out, they are playing just fine. And you know what? The ground game finally looked completely reinvigorated as a whole. You've got Moss, you've got Taylor both pounding the rock like that. Despite the losses, they've improved in multiple areas. I'm really, really confident, though, in the head coach of that football team, Shane Steichen. He can make a lot of things happen with not very much. I'm not saying that Minshew isn't a great backup quarterback, but they only lost by 1 point, given horrible calls and 4 turnovers. So Steichen knows what he's doing. So I think overall, you got to feel pretty confident despite the losses.
I think the Colts will be just fine if Gardner Minshew stops turning the ball over.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's a big if. So far,
Yeah.
8 turnovers in 2 games. So
A
he's
lot.
gonna have to overcome that and prove that he can do that. But yeah, I mean, I think Shane Steichen has already proven in his short amount of time here with the Colts that he is a rock star as a head coach. You see this defense is really, when they're not backed up against the wall all game, they're able to hold their own. I think Shaquille Leonard is coming back into his own. We see Kenny Moore playing at a high level, DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Zaire Franklin. All these guys are playing at a really high level. So if you can stop from turning the ball over, Jonathan Taylor's coming back. You keep the wide receivers involved. I think this Colts team is going to be just fine. Now, do I think this Colts team is going to win the division? I don't know if I'll go that far, but I think they'll be contenders in every single game the rest of the season. So it's going to be interesting, and as long as we don't run into any more terrible officials, which that will happen, because it seems like most of the NFL officials are terrible at this point. But so we just hope that they don't affect the outcome of any more games for this team moving forward. So Drake, let's talk about the injury report real quick. Talk about some of the Colts that missed the game yesterday and also kind of left the game with injuries. Braden Smith still dealing with that hip injury. He did not play against the Browns. Kylan Granson did not pass the concussion protocol. Colts are hoping to get him back this week against the New Orleans Saints. We'll see if he ends up practicing on Wednesday. But the 2 new injuries, Drake, Juju Brents. This one's a big one because Juju Brents was playing very well against Amari Cooper on Sunday. Brents goes down with a quad injury. Shane Steichen didn't really elaborate too much on that today. We'll find out a little bit more on Wednesday. I don't think I don't have any word on this, but you're hoping that it's just a quad strain or a pulled muscle in the quad, something like that, rather than a torn quad, because if it's a torn quad, that pretty much ends the season for Juju Brents.
Yeah, and this is professional football, so we're just going to call it as we see it. But Darrell Baker Jr. is next in line. Okay, this is a guy who we were talking about at first, but once he started getting into real competition, you see the weaknesses in his game, and so that's really the next next guy in line. So if Juju Brents can't play, I mean, you might see the Colts defensive secondary struggle even more than they already have, developing as a young unit. But yeah, Juju Brents, man, he battled injuries in the offseason, and here he is having a quad injury. Like you said, a tear in a pole or a strain, all three completely different things. You just hope that it's a pull or something real simple to diagnose, simple to get over, and then it was just kind of like an in the middle of the game type thing that got him out for the rest of the contest.
Right. And so we'll learn more about that on Wednesday when Shane Steichen speaks again, as much as Shane Steichen is willing to reveal about that injury. But fingers crossed that it's nothing too serious for Juju Brents. And then finally the last one, which people might not think is as important, but because Grover Stewart is going to be out still for the next 5 games, this one's pretty important. Eric Johnson, the backup nose tackle, that took the majority of the snaps for Grover Stewart yesterday, came off the field late with an ankle injury, so we don't know the severity of that. But with Eric Johnson out, that would mean Taven Bryan probably gets the majority of those snaps in there. And when we saw yesterday and have continued to, and really have seen all season, when Taven Bryan's in there on the middle of that defensive line on run plays, he's pretty much not there. He gets easily moved out of the way. Really good pass rusher on the interior. Not so great run defender for the Colts. So could be just another. Have to look for another body in there to help stop runs up the middle until Grover Stewart comes back.
Yeah, and Taven Bryan, he's been trying to battle in the NFL to show that he's relevant enough to be deserving of a first round selection. He was a first round pick, so he up to this point he's not played up to his level of expectations. But like you said, if it's 3rd and 7 and he's in there, awesome, fantastic. If it's like 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, man, he's not a good run defender. He just isn't. He's an athletic, quicker defensive interior lineman that rushes the passer really well. So that's a much bigger loss with Eric Johnson right now than what you think. You just hope that it's not for very long.
Exactly. So who knows? Maybe we'll see more Dio Dangbo and Tyquan Lewis in the middle if that's the case. But
Do it.
but you really can't afford to lose any more bodies in the middle of that defensive line. So Drake, let's move along to the latest Colts news and rumors here. And I really want to get your thoughts on this because you did write a piece on this for horseshoehuddle.com today. Michael Pittman Jr. made some interesting comments after the loss yesterday about not necessarily getting enough targets, not getting the ball enough. So Drake, you're the one that wrote the piece. Go ahead and dive into what those comments were and just give me your thoughts on what might be going through Michael Pittman's head right now.
Well, first off, shout out to Indy Star's Nate Atkins. He was the one who actually asked these questions and got these answers from Michael Pittman Jr. But basically, he said, I don't know why I didn't get targeted more. I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have it in front of me, but he basically said, I can make a home run play happen at any given time when I've got the ball in my hands. I proved that. I'm just frustrated. I didn't want to portray that on the rest of my teammates in the middle of a close game. I wrote the piece and, I had some people on social media commenting like, oh, well, come on, man, why is he complaining? You could say that. And yes, he probably could have reserved himself a little bit from saying that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know what they were doing. I don't know if I'm that big of a piece of the offense. It's like, Michael, you're the biggest part of the passing offense. Of course, you're a huge part of the offense. It's like Denzel freaking Ward is covering you. This is a defense that is known for snuffing out the passing game. They probably had a game plan for you, which is why Josh Downs had so many receiving yards, is because eventually then they started to divert more attention to Downs, and here goes Michael Pittman pulling off a 75-yard touchdown. So I think that it was the defense's game plan to remove Michael Pittman. I think he was just pissed off with the calls. I think he was pissed off that they lost a close game. I think he really wanted to be the impact player in that game that made the difference happen. I think that people need to look at these comments with a grain of salt and realize this is a competitive guy who has a lot of emotion. He gave a peace sign, for God's sakes, to the defenders as he was running away from him. He's just pissed off they lost.
I think you nailed it right on the head there, Drake. I don't think this is any indication that Michael Pittman wants out of Indy, that he is upset with his role. Michael Pittman is a very emotional player, And that's part of the reason why I love Michael Pittman Jr. so much, because you see him play with that emotion. He plays his heart out every single game, whether it's blocking, receiving. If he didn't, you wouldn't see him trying to run through tackles every time he's got the football. It was a very emotional loss. And I think you're right. He wanted to be that impact player. He wanted to do more. He believes that when he has the ball in his hand, that he can make plays happen. And we've seen it multiple times out of Michael Pittman Jr. I wouldn't put too much stock into there being a lot of drama behind the scenes. Shane Steichen was asked about it today. Shane Steichen liked to hear that. He said, I want to hear that emotion from our best players, and I want them to show that they care. Michael Pittman Jr. has certainly done that. We've heard Chris Ballard talk about the emotion and the passion that Michael Pittman has for this, and that's really all that I think this is Pittman was pissed because the Colts should have won that game, and he feels like he could have done more to affect the outcome of the game. So it's not more of a thing that's saying, I want to get 14 targets or 15 targets a game to pad my stats. That's never how Michael Pittman has been. The only reason he wants the ball is because he feels like he can make an impact to win the game. So I don't think there's any drama surrounding this. I think it's a good thing that Michael Pittman cares this much about this team and cares this much about winning. And it's just one of the very many reasons that I think the Colts should sign Michael Pittman Jr. and lock this kid up long term, because he gets it. He's a Colt, and he's really, really good for this organization. Patrick with another super chat here, and he says part of it is that Pittman shoots his mouth off a lot. Part of it is he was mad about the game. Last part is that he's setting up his importance for upcoming contract battle to inflate his money. So I mean, it could probably be all three of these, but I think we've seen Michael Pittman do this before. We've also seen Michael Pittman be very, very, very hard on himself. What comes to mind for me is I think it was last season against the Washington Commanders, where Michael Pittman dropped a ball and he said, the reason we lost this game was because of me. And it was me solely. And it certainly was not just on Michael Pittman Jr. to lose that game. So it's just he's very emotional. And I think that with how Michael Pittman has handled his contract situation, I commend him with how he's doing it. I think he's going to get paid regardless. You hope it's here within Indy, because he is a weapon that I think Shane Steichen can use in his offense, and has already shown how he can use Michael Pittman in this offense. Again, I'm not going to put too much stock into it. I think he's just an emotional player. It's not going to cause any drama between Pittman and this coaching staff. That's just not how I see Pittman really going about this. So Patrick, really thankful for you, buddy. Thanks again for all of your super chats every single night. You're just an absolute legend. There's a reason he is the CFO. So let's move along to our final couple news things here to wrap up our show before we go to Colts player of the game. Colts claimed cornerback Amir Speed off of waivers from the Patriots. So there's some cornerback help. And then to make room for Amir Speed, they waived wide receiver Amari Rodgers. So I don't know too much about Amir Speed, Drake, but hey, with Juju Brents going down, more depth at corner is obviously needed.
Yeah, and the thing is, the way that Daryl Baker Jr. has played, you want to have that depth at corner. I believe that he was actually drafted. I think that Amir Speed, if I'm not mistaken, it looks like the Patriots released him, and then I think that he was actually picked up as a 6th round pick. No, he was traded by the Raiders as a 6th round pick to the Patriots for a 4th round pick. So he's a rookie. So, he's maybe he could actually find his footing in the NFL with the Colts, but this is mostly due to Juju Brents, and the Colts just don't want to have a super thin cornerback room, especially as they're hitting the midway point in the season.
All right, Drake, let's close out the show on a high note here. Let's do Colts player of the game. So who made the biggest impact? Although it was a loss, there was a lot of players that played great on Sunday. So Drake, give me your Colts player of the game against the Browns.
Oh, real quick, it's Josh Downs. I'm doing it. I think that I'm just so high on this kid, man. 6 targets, 5 receptions, 125 freaking receiving yards. His first career touchdown, his best career game as far as receiving yards. Josh Downs looks legit. He's got my vote. I think that he's absolutely playing out of his mind, and if he eclipses 1,000 yards, hell of a rookie season.
No qualms with that pick whatsoever. Josh Downs, another great game for the Colts, quickly becoming a star on this offense. My pick, Kenny Moore the second. Kenny Moore is all the way back, playing at a Pro Bowl form, 10 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits, almost came away with that interception there. You love to see Kenny Moore playing at such a high level once again. And you know what? He's probably playing himself into another contract with the Indianapolis Colts, which is something I didn't necessarily know was going to happen here at the beginning of the 2023 season. But I'm certainly glad that Kenny Moore is off to the start that he is. So, guys, the Cleveland game is over. We're on to the New Orleans Saints, and it's time to put that bad juju behind us. And hopefully we see a much better performance and a better outcome for the Colts here on this upcoming Sunday. So that's our show for this weekend, guys. Really, really appreciate everybody tuning in, listening to our rants, opening up their feelings, getting all their frustration out about this game. Shout out to the super chats from this evening. Truitt, my beautiful wife Danielle, Tom Brady, Jake Walton, Patrick, Stats, Matt, all of you guys. Really, really appreciate all your support as always. You make this so much fun every single Monday and Thursday night. And if you haven't done so, please follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live, whenever Shad goes live. And as CMDSR says, hit the like button for the video on your way out as well. Thank you so much, CMDSR. Really appreciate you coming and watching us every single episode as well. And if you can't catch us live, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Drake and I, as always, have been cranking out content on horseshoehuddle.com. So Drake, tell the people what you've written so they can go check it out.
MPJ's thoughts on the offensive involvement, as Andrew mentioned, and then the 3 good and 3 bad in the loss to Browns.
Definitely go check those out. Great pieces by Drake. Every piece Drake puts out is quality content. So make sure you go check that out. For me, guys, I think you know what my piece was about if you haven't checked it out already. The Colts got hosed yesterday by the officials against the Browns. And when is the NFL going to hold them accountable? So make sure if you want to check out my deep dive into all of that, make sure you go to horseshoehuddle.com to check that out, as well as all the fantastic pieces we have out on the site. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we will be back Thursday night to break down and get you all set for Colts versus Saints Week 8 matchup in Lucas Oil Stadium for Halloween weekend. It's gonna be a fun one. So for Drake, I'm Andrew. Enjoy your week. One more super chat from Patrick for open bars, diapers, Mrs. Moore's next road trip, and the Moore's first anniversary. Patrick, you are the saint of this show. Really appreciate it, buddy. So from all of us here at Horseshoe Huddle, enjoy your week, and we'll be talking to you Thursday night. Take it easy.